I want to start with a little bit of review just from our past weeks together, and then today we're going to be primarily on this digital discipleship. Again, the bulk of this presentation here was made by David Kinnaman. Of course, if that Faith for Exiles book that I've referenced, he was he and Mark. Not, yeah. I see what you did there. Uh, I think it's Matlock. It just doesn't seem right. Like it just shouldn't be Matlock. But anyway, Mark Matlock, I think, and David Kinnaman wrote Faith for Exiles. David Kinnaman's the president or CEO, whatever his title is, of Barna now, not Barna. But anyway, so that will be this. But first, let's just look back at some of the stuff we've talked about. The practices that will distinguish resilient disciples. First one they mentioned we talked about was experiencing Jesus, teaching our students not just to know things about God, but to have a vibrant relationship with God, one where they feel like they communicate to Him and He speaks to them. You know, or how would you articulate experiencing Jesus? As you look back at our time, what would something we'd want to develop in our students to experience Jesus? Something unique, different than just knowing about Him. What would something be to experience Jesus? Yeah, that is. Yeah, it's absolutely. Simple practices. One thing I think we probably have done a poor job of teaching or encouraging is for fear of something that would be too experiential based is a point where you listen to Jesus speak to you. It's like you read God's word and then we so quickly rush on to the next thing. But the Bible's very clear. God would have something to say to us. This is a two-way conversation. And again, so many times it's just in our hurried lifestyle. It's like you read scripture, you check it off the list, and you're on. You haven't had a moment where you hear, well, what is God telling me to do as a result of what I've read today? What am I supposed to change in my life as a result of what I've read? This is, experiencing Jesus. The next one would be cultural discernment. What's cultural discernment? Yeah, it's not just taking everything in, but processing what it is that you are seeing. Yeah, understanding it through the lens of Scripture. Anybody would add to that? Okay, yeah. There's a perspective outside of the American perspective. There's one that would be older than my perspective. Yeah, this is. Yeah, a lot of times we take everything in and assume this is the way it's always been.
Worldview is everyone else's worldview.
Yep, and this would be a big thing about Gen Z was that the average or the oldest stuff that Gen Z typically interacts with is 2 weeks old. That's the oldest stuff they interact with, on average. So that's not very old, all right. Their average intake of information, in a day of what they consume, the oldest of what they consume in an average day would be 2 weeks old.
So in other words, if it's not a modern novel, they're not even reading it.
Yeah,
Modern novel, like they're not
yeah, yeah. I wasn't gonna. Yeah, it would be the minority that was, and they're taking into account the fact that they might even read a book like Hunger Games or something right now. So that would make that average older, and then it still at that point still stays average 2 weeks. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, just think about the news cycle. Man, some incredibly awful thing will happen. You give it a week, radio silence. It's just like everybody has moved on. Stuff feels old. Yeah, right. So cultural discernment. We also, again, my favorite example of this, or most helpful example, is that of Daniel in Scripture. There were the things that he did and did not do, things that he engaged with, and he chose to abstain from, and even the things that he chose to abstain from weren't necessarily because they were against God's law or God's plan, but he chose to abstain from things that made him feel like he was at home in Babylon. He kept his home in God, is the phrase that we use. Meaningful relationships. This will be as we think about Gen Z, or maybe our responsibility to Gen Z, or what things that we want to develop in our kids. Those meaningful relationships that we can help in them. If you go, I bet if you Google Faith for Exiles relationship map, if you're interested in such a thing, they have a really neat tool that you know it's like a grid, it's a 3x3 grid, and you put your kid in the middle of that grid, so that they are that at the center there. So they have all these blocks around them, and then you put the other in each of those other blocks. You put another person in their life, and then you, on a scale of no influence to basically my kid just eats up everything this person says, to a 10, 0 to 10. And then you kind of put those people, and then you rate their influence on your kid's life, right? And then you think, okay, what do I want that number to be? So say you've got your kid, I'll put Stella there in the middle. I think of her friends, I put a few friends. I'd put Denise Johnson in there. It leads her D group on Wednesday nights. I'd put, Kathy Stafford, who's a friend of ours, involved. But to each of these, there would be, maybe that number would be higher or lower. But then you think, what do I want that number to be? And then you make a plan to adjust that number. You might have somebody in your kid's life that's at an 8 that needs to be at like a 2. And you need to say, hey, maybe you tell them that outright. Maybe you just organize things in their lives to reduce that. Or maybe you're saying, man, this person would be so good for them. I see so much of my kid in them. I see they have a lot of shared interests or things that are interesting to them, or passions that they have. I need to reach out to this person and see if they would be more involved in my kid's life. And then you can adjust those influence numbers through this relationship map. It's a really helpful tool. I would encourage you, or maybe you think about, you put yourself in the middle. You think about other people in your life that, hey, I need to maintain this. This is a 10. I need to maintain 10 from this person. Or if I really enjoy being with this, or this, I'll enjoy the way this person sees the world. Need to get this number up. It's helpful. But for us as a church, there's some meaningful relationships on here. I just see a great potential, and Buck Run does a great job. The next one we talked about was vocational discipleship. This is where we want to help our kids to right-size their ambitions to God's call on their life. And again, I would reference back to that the non-existent secular sacred divide. Now, we make one, but there's not one in Scripture. And how do we help our kids to determine, what ought I do with my life? How can I use the gifts and skills that God has given me to use it to advance the kingdom? Mentorship was a big thing that we talked about during that, and just how do we utilize the gifts of other people to help our kids through relationship to think intentionally about how they might minister in the workplace. Then the last one was a countercultural mission. That is, we come to grips with the reality that the more we do these things, the more out of place we will feel. And it's helpful for us to set our kids up to not be trying to find their home here, to not make this place seem more familiar, but really to make it seem more unfamiliar. That to find our home in God was the phrase that they used in the book, and I feel like it's helpful. Any of these you found particularly helpful or encouraging or challenging? Would you care to share?
Your child experience Jesus can be challenging. Like you mentioned, camp can be a great
Yeah.
You don't want 1 out of 52.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Getting them there is challenging to figure out how to accomplish.
Yeah.
It's the real life.
Yeah. I was talking this week about camp and its impact, and I think, one thing I think camp will be important for going forward is to just get you in a big room with a bunch of people to help you feel like, okay, this is real. This we will. I'm not. The Sam Chan guy I referenced, was the evangelism and skeptical world guy. He talked about plausibility structures for you to be. When you're in a place every day where you're the only person that believes the gospel, it starts to feel less and less plausible. And then everything you interact with online is just an affront against what you believe. That's challenging. And frankly, it's consuming this generation. But then you get to a place like camp, and you're in an auditorium with 800 people, and then you might be the only person that doesn't believe it. It's to help you see, okay, this is good. This is changing people's lives. This is making a difference. And this is what a church does every week. It's like a shot in the arm to say, okay, hey, this is real. I'm watching this affect people's lives. Again, the truth of God's word. I don't mean to even lessen any of the work of the Holy Spirit and all those things, but we need, in God's wisdom, he used all these different tools to help embolden us in our faith. And yeah, that's good. You started to say. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is a great challenge of parenting, where it's like you want your kid to be a good friend to even the ones that you might not want to spend all their time with, but yeah, how do you kind of shape their friendship priorities? Yeah, I remember when Stella was little, she had a friend she always wanted to be around, but it was like she'd come back from being with her. It was like, so how was it? She was like, well, she's kind of mean, and and we're like, well, what should a friend do and be? Yeah, it was challenging, but the stakes get increasingly higher. So yeah, good. Anything else? Any other takeaways from weeks past? It's okay. Maybe I should have waited till the end of class when you guys are warmed up. It's okay. Well, I want to take the rest of this class. We talked about, I did want to set up some helpful, I guess, just things for us to understand as we help navigate in this digital world from screen usage and interaction with this stuff. So we'll dive into this. So Gen Z, we talked about this. They're the first generation of screenagers. So this is, they've never known anything besides this, and now they're being raised by parents that have never known anything besides this a world steeped in screens. And again, we are very very aware of their proclivity to be on a screen, but so much of the time they're having to get our attention away from screens as well. So they're not just obsessed with screens; they are their parents are, and so they're being raised by parents who are equally tethered to and shaped by screens. And again, our tendency in so many of these things is to point a finger at them, but we'll remember they're seeing in us things that we value, things that are important to us, and they're playing off of that in so many ways. And we've talked about this each week, that screens disciple. They are teaching us something. Our inclination to look at our phones is doing something to our brain, right? We're more easily distracted. It's harder to focus on things. And then you take into account what we consume when we're on the screens. That's a whole different thing that we're talking about, is what claims are they making? How do we understand this? So then some stats for you. So this study what came from Barna's second volume of their study on Gen Z. So if you're interested, you can Google most of this. I don't recommend the books. Well, they're fine, but they're like $40 and they're very small, so that's not. Just Google some of the info. Don't purchase the book. But this is from the second study, volume 2 of the Gen Z study, which was done in July of 2020. So all of this information is coming from at the early in the pandemic. So it's a little bit closer to what I feel is accurate. So here you go, that estimated amount of time per day spent on a smartphone. Now, this is not including time for work or school. So if they were spending all day in class on Zoom or whatever, that was not a part of this number. So this is in addition to anything that they would be required to be doing. So, when you think about this is a job, this is job level hours that they spend on screens. Fascinating. Any observations there? Yeah. I mean, you'd have to be. At some point, it's like if you go to school all day, or whatever, or your work, and then, at some point the hours start overlapping, yeah. Yeah. Again, imagine if you were at a job and you just got out a book and started reading it. You'd say, you can't do that, but you get out a phone and it's like, I don't think so. I mean, again, you're saying, you're asking them, what and this is this isn't data from the phone. This is data from, them asking questions, and you get to evaluate what you consider screen time or not. Yeah, that's a great question. If your screen's up, yeah, yeah, yeah. If you turn something on and then
Then it counts as screen time.
that's screen time.
I've got the GPS open.
If you're on a phone call and it's sitting there open, and you can see the number pad. That your phone would count that as screen time. That's not the data they're pulling here. This is just, hey, you're filling out this questionnaire, which you can't read this, but this is U.S. teens and young adults ages 13 and 21. The data was pulled from June 15th to July 17th of 2020. Yeah, you would find a lot more interaction with the social media stuff from females than male is what the data would say. You have other platforms like YouTube is like 75% male dominated space, which is interesting to me. That's like, I never really thought about that, but that's like a male dominated platform. Instagram is heavily weighted towards females. So yeah, I do think it is probably how people interact and what they interact with is like, I do think a guy will look at his phone and doom scroll for a minute, but as a girl is going to interact with it a lot more deeply and, a lot more interested in the comments and what's said and checking likes and things like that. So here, I don't expect you to read all this, but when Gen Z, when they feel anxious, which they say that they do, it's if you're feeling anxious, what makes you feel better, right? So that's the middle is this question. Some interesting, this is what Gen Z said, right? I like to make jokes about what I'm worried about. We'll look at how humor is portrayed online. This is all interesting stuff to me. But yeah, I use social media to cope. Breathing exercises. I usually run it off or lift weights. You do see an obsession with health now. There's, of course, in my younger days, I did triathlons and, stuff, and you would think about heart rate, and maybe even if you really get deep into it, you would think about your VO2 max, and that was about as deep as you would get. Now, you have apps to track your macros, and it's like all this stuff that's like, this wasn't even, there's like a level of science involved in exercise now that just wasn't present. And I talked to a kid recently, and he obsesses about all this stuff, and he tracks all of this thing. I mean, I would say it is to the point of a true obsession. He's tracking all this about what he eats and his calories, and it's like, oh, are you a professional basketball player? It's like, no, I don't play any sports. It's odd. So when they feel anxious, this is what they do. And of course, they would say screens would contribute to their feelings of anxiousness and loneliness. When you're feeling lonely, what makes you feel better? This was interesting. I watched videos of concerts on my phone. Some of these are good. I get on my bike and go for a ride. I usually feel lonely in some sense. Right? This is, here's another. I'll disappear into a world of my own, whether I make one myself or one that's already been created, like books, shows, or games. The appeal for a lot of these things is that you can enter into a world of your own making, and then you get to be whoever you want to be. You get to portray yourself. Has anybody read the book Ready Player One? Yeah. Or the movie. Yeah, it's a movie. Yeah, seen the movie. Yeah, I liked the book. But I think so the principle of the book is there's this world that exists that's an awful world. But then you put on this VR headset and you wear these gloves and things, and then you get to enter into this virtual world when you get to be whoever you want to be. I honestly don't think that's too far away. I mean, you have people like Facebook or Meta that are trying to present this as a world in which you could go and do your work. You enter into this virtual world through the VR headset, and then you do your work there.
The next level.
At least the next level. Yeah, it feels like 3 levels. But that's right. Yeah, you could enter into this world. Now, the thing that it sounds crazy, but you can, for a Gen Zer, right, you get to be who you want to be, who you wish you were in this world. Right? So you enter into this space, and if you're a guy in the actual world, but you want to be a female in this, you can be that. If you are, slow and heavy set in the real world, you get to go and be however fit as you want to be in this world, right? And then you interact with people based on who you set yourself up to be. So you talk about this world that's been created, you get to go into a world that's been created. I do think over the next 10 or 15 years, probably the two big things that will shape our next decade will be AI and VR, the artificial intelligence stuff, and then going into the world. Right now, they have a few things that they're trying to figure out with the VR that is kind of keeping it from catching on. I think they will figure it out how to fix it, because right now it's like there's no good way to move forward in VR, right? So if you're in a room, you put this headset on. If I was to walk, I'd walk into this wall, and there's a lot of really good YouTube videos about that. Right? Yeah, recommend them. Okay, yeah, so yeah, it's on. Yeah, so you'd probably come across it on a reel. But yeah, however you find the videos. But yeah, so they can't sort this out. This is how do we find a natural way to move about in this VR world? That's the big barrier right now. I think when they break through that, then you'll have a lot more. It'll grow a lot more. Anyway, we kind of digress. Yeah, well, you lead us beautifully into this next one, because these are the emotions that they feel. So a way I like to think about these is if you combine the always and usually, so then like encourage. So 45% of Gen Z would feel encouraged using social media. Would always or usually feel encouraged using social media. So you think about what they engage with. You think about what their problems are, and then you think about the content that we know to be on social media. Do you want them to feel encouraged from that material? Now, so you might look at this data and say, "Oh, this is nice. You know, they're feeling accepted." Yeah. What is driving that acceptance? What's driving the encouragement, appreciation, whatever it is? And then you think if you go to the appreciation, it's like, man, you post something online, you get your feedback loop based off of this. You're getting these dopamine hits from this thing. It is. Then you're encouraged to put more of that stuff. What is valued? What's important? So it is. Even the stuff that might appear to be good might not necessarily. Now it just depends on what you're interacting with. There's, Will puts out these reels that I love, that are awesome, helpful tips on way to interact with Scripture or apologetics that are very good, right? So you go look at that. If this is what you're consuming and how you you would feel encouraged based off of this. But there would be some things that you don't want to be encouraged about. And then in the backdrop of all this, you just think about yourself when you were a middle schooler and just how weird you felt, right? That's just the worst time of life, is it not? And now you're in a situation in which the world is saying, well, probably the way that you don't feel at home here, it would be because you actually were supposed to be a female, or you should have been a male. And then if you do that, you'll have instant acceptance and deep community, all the deepest longings of a middle schooler, right? To be accepted and feel like you're a part of something, and you'll be affirmed. And this will solve your problems, so it's something to consider. And then the emotions that they feel, critical, the insecure, popular, isolated, harassed. So they're even the ones I'm glad people aren't by and large feeling bullied, but there's still a significant part of the population that does feel that. I'm going to kind of blaze through some of this, and here you'll see the difference in male and female in some of these areas. Obviously, girls, as they interact with what they see on social media, that takes a more significant toll. You can find. I'll share a link later in this, but Jonathan Haidt has a really insightful article, and I think he presents it in a talk as well, but just about the difference between how guys sort out their problems and girls sort out their problems. Guy has an issue, he's likely going to go confront somebody. Maybe it would result in a fight or some lower scale version of a fight, altercation verbally. If a girl feels hurt by another girl, what does she usually do? Go and talk about them, right? And now again, this isn't an insult on females. It's just statistically, this is what you see, what happens. So then you have a platform for this to take place where you feel like this girl's hurt you. You go online and then you can say things about them, where guys would show their anger, frustration in different ways. Yeah, so you're not. This isn't. We don't get to peer into their soul and see how it really is affecting them. This was their articulation, and I think the way the information is presented here, it's like you would say, "Oh, I feel more connected through social media. But I think in reality, when you step back, you are more isolated, right? You're actually distance yourself from real relationships and real people. And I think if we look in ways to thoughtfully engage with it, you'll see, man, this we might articulate this is helping me connect with people, but I think what it actually shows is this is making me be further away from real people and real relationships. This is what they're saying. Their perspectives on social media. I use it to stay informed. I compare myself to other people. This was interesting. I wish I spent less time on social media. Again, you can see how the some of these statements, how they resonate with people or don't. And then these we're almost through with the stats here, but this is interesting. 60% say my generation spends too much time on screens. 25% say we're at just the right amount. 3% says I think we should spend more time. That's interesting. And that'd be my kids. You don't let us have this enough. And then I just don't think it matters. I think a lot of people a lot of Gen Z would agree that they're addicted to their screens. But the illustration I use is like they see their screen addiction like I see my coffee addiction. What does it matter? Like I have coffee every day, so what, right? But their screens, they do feel tethered to their screens. Maybe you remember me saying that we don't allow our staff in the summer to have their phones with them during the day at camp. I should never see your phone. We did say just don't ever let a guest see your phone, and the parameters were too close. So we said, okay, they need to stay back at your housing. Parents freaked out, and yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we've created our own little psychoses from our feeling to need to know where they are every second. But when we tell staff all the interviews do say, hey, one of these are, I tell them up front, this is one of the requirements. You can't have your phone. How does that make you feel? If you couldn't have your phone all summer, you'll be shocked. Most of them say, I would love that. I would love that. Now, they get to camp, I'll tell you, they don't love that. When they get here, but the idea of it, they're like, that would be so good. If somebody else imposed this restriction on me.
They acknowledge the need for it.
I know, yeah. I mean, it's like a real addiction. It is a real addiction. And they say, this would be great. But for reasons A, B, and C, I got to have my phone with me. It's like, no, you don't. You're not going to. And and it's crazy. It's like even some of them think, I'm going to take my phone, and then when I'm in this private moment, I'll post on social media for my bosses to see. It's like, yeah. So anyway, it is. But they know when we say, hey, you got to be without this, they say that would be awesome. I would love that. I've never lost anybody because of it. There's nobody that's kind of just self-evaluated out of that. Now maybe it's because they're in an interview and they think it's what we want to hear. I don't know. But yeah, it is a constant battle all summer long too. You want to be sympathetic, but you're also just trying to set them up, because it's like if I'm telling you don't let a guest see it, I'm just not. I just don't want to be the phone police. Anyway, I'm talking about my work now. Yes, sir. It is negligible how much it's about the people they actually know. It right now, especially because TikTok has the highest time spent. I'm blanking on the term that they use, but it's like, how much time do you spend in an app once you open it up? Maybe they call it engagement. I can't remember. But it's like, maybe 2 minutes on Instagram, for instance. On TikTok, it's in the 20s. Okay, so when you open up TikTok, you're likely to be in TikTok for like 20 minutes. And most of that, what's created in TikTok is created by people that that's what they do. Very few people have any significant number of their friends that are actually creating stuff in TikTok. Most of that is like you're following hashtags, you're seeing, you're going down this rabbit trail about this thing or that. So, of course, our defense about using social media is about staying connected, and that's not what's happening with it. It's like text them. If you do it to be connected, group text. Great question. Anything else about that? Well, it is, yeah. But and I've heard of churches. Again, this isn't a commentary on right or wrong, but they've started changing their sermon titles with SEO in mind, search engine optimization, so that people, when they're looking for stuff, so then the messages ultimately gets geared towards what people want to hear. Because then whenever you get into a situation, it's this feedback loop that's everywhere else. They're going that, well, the more people, I want to put the posts out that get the most likes. So I find the thing that people interact with the most. That's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna tell you, it's the salacious material. For most of the teens, it's like, man, the crazier, more outlandish it is, that's what gets the engagement. That's what drives the dopamine hits. And that's why they put more of it in the church. It's like, well, it's like, hey, 10 ways to have better work, rest rhythms. It's like the sermon. Anyway, you just can't ultimately be driven by these things. That's good. And this was interesting how they say humor. This is so true. I find things to be funny that my parents don't. 47% agree strongly. This is interesting. Now, again, I get a front row view of this through our summer staff. Every year they'll make like a parody Instagram account. And it's like they're posting stuff. I just don't get it. I don't even understand it. I gotta bring in an intern to translate it for me. I'm like, what am I looking at here? And they're like, well, then they're drawing diagrams so I can understand this joke. And I'm like, so Kermit drinking tea equals, yeah. Anyway, that is interesting. I spend a lot of time scrolling through memes when I'm bored. That's a significant percentage. I'll tell you, my phone goes crazy at night. I turn notifications off on like internal like Instagram like messages and stuff. It's just like every college kid I know sends me funny memes at like 11:30 at night. Because that's what they do, right? It's like they're winding down from the day, and they're scrolling this stuff, and it's like, I should just show you this is. I know this to be true because that's when I get some really funny stuff, and some things I don't understand. But anyway, this was interesting to me. I find humor in things that I shouldn't. They would articulate, yeah, this is. I probably shouldn't think this is funny. I think it's funny. You do see a rise in cynical humor, and you're honestly seeing kind of the culture consume itself in some of these things. You have some of this dark, cynical humor that people think is funny turning out to be hate crimes. You're seeing people being prosecuted for some of these memes. I listened to there is a book by a guy, John Ronson. So You've Been Publicly Shamed is the name of this book, and it's fascinating. but it's it's a lot of this stuff. It's like people being publicly shamed, for basically for posting some of this dark humor. I don't recommend. Most of the book is great. Anyway, so if you read it and you find the part that's not great, I try to tell you. So there's connected to their well-being. Again, you're now this is kind of bringing some of the resilient disciple into this. So now they're looking at of the information they got from the people they identified as resilient disciples. Here's how they feel in general about their well-being. So this is kind of an overview based on some things that we had seen previously. So now, how do we help people navigate? We think about our kids. How do we help them navigate? How do we help them navigate social media? I don't think social media is inherently evil. I think there's, like anything, there's evil on it, and there's some things that are fine on there. And there are ways that, most things in the world is a tool, and how you wield it will largely be its importance. So, but one, I will just walk through these. You have to, if your kids are going to use social media, you have to prepare them to discern what's good and bad on there. Where is this information coming from? What the little comment I put on there is give them a permit. You don't just say, hey, you're 16 now, you get a car. There's a process in which you are given the keys to a vehicle. You have to prove through observation that you can be responsible with this stuff. You don't just hand it over. You say, hey, let's walk you through this. Let's help you understand this. So we'll talk a little bit more about what those things can be. And they just need to be aware. It is a digital slot machine. This stuff is created so that you will keep interacting with it. It's designed that way. They call that the machine zone. This is a term that they use even within people that create social media apps. They call it the machine zone. There's a podcast I heard where at a casino, right? You're not allowed to. It's illegal to make the games make you win or lose. It has to be proven to be genuinely random. But in these new casinos that you go, Candace loves them. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. That's not true. You get a card, right? So all of your money gets loaded onto a card, and you go and you scan your card, say on the slot machines, right? They can't make the slot machine, though they're digital, they can't make you win or lose. What they can do is track how many times in a row you are losing, okay? And then what they know internally is we need to give this person a win if we want to keep them here pulling this lever, right? So if you scan your card, they can track your success. They know exactly how much you're getting put back onto the card or taken off of it. And they know it. They have it proven statistically, and they can see, hey, at slot machine 27, they haven't won in a while. Go give them a free drink and a free buffet card, right? And so somebody comes up and says, hey, we just like to thank you for being a loyal patron here and spending your time here. We just want to say thanks and glad to have you. Here's something for the buffet and a drink on the house. What registers in their mind is a win. Okay, back to, they say thanks, keep on pulling the bar. That's how social media is created. If you have Facebook, and if you can, go without it for a couple days. Okay, you'll start getting increased notifications. You'll get a red notification on stuff that you don't typically get notified for, because they know you get a dopamine hit when you see somebody's interacted with one of your posts. So they'll increase. So you haven't been on in a few days, then you'll get an email that says, hey, so-and-so just posted something you might find interesting. That just happened to you? No. Oh, shit, it was him. It wasn't me. I don't like it. Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah. So it's its own brand of pride, right? When we were, I don't use social media. But these are how these things are created to make sure that you get these dopamine hits that would say, hey, keep on, you get in the machine zone. All of these. I noticed just this week in Twitter, now when you look at a video on Twitter, at the bottom it says swipe up for more. So what they're trying to do is get you in here. Now, before you could do that, but there was no indication. You would have to know that the gesture get to the next videos to do it. Well, another part of this is you called it a customer. You're actually the product. You know, when you get anything for free, I can't remember who said this, but I think it was Mark Cuban. If you get something for free, you aren't the customer, you are the product that's being sold. And for you to use Facebook, you're being sold as a consumer to advertisers. And this is what's happening. You were trying. I think the argument would be is the salt and light argument, but then you would have to be brutally honest. Is that what I'm doing? Is that how I'm interacting with this? And I think, that's the next one, be honest about the positives and negatives. I do hope as a result of this that some people go, not for your kids, but for you. You go, this isn't the goals that I have for this aren't being achieved through this. I don't know why I would stay on this. I do think there's ways that it can be redeemed. There is a lot of pressure in which to stay connected with people. You are on it, but again, that's why I do think it just takes a whole lot of discernment on how to engage with it. I do think there are ways to be light in it. Where we all know it gets hairy is when there's something that's not just being presented as, or when we know there's genuinely evil stuff that is out for their souls, that has a potential to destroy them. Whereas like a museum is it's a safe way to interact with information, but it's like, well, there's porn out there, and this will destroy your life, and that's where it's like, or people and real people that would seek to do you harm. But I do think you have to teach these things. You don't want them. Again, I think this is in another slide here about the filtering, but you have to teach them ultimately when to actively walk away from something, to flee a thing, what to interact with, how to interact thoughtfully. Personal story, the other day I find Herschel, he's got his headphones in, he's bebopping along. I was like, oh, what do you listen to? And I just see panic on his face. And he proceeds to tell me the name of this song, which has a cuss word in the title. Because I asked him, and I'm like, oh, what's it? He's like, well, it's so good. Sis just came up here. I don't know. So, I'm like, what's the name of the song? He's like, it's unimportant, And I was like, we get it. So he says what the name of it is, and I'm telling him, like, look. He said, well. Apple Music recommended this. I was like, then you hit next. This is going to happen. I told him, I can't create a world in which this stuff never comes at you. I'm trying to pace it out, and like at times at which you're ready to interact with this thing. But at some point, you're going to have to decide, this thing comes to me. I'm going to turn away, walk away, do the next thing, whatever it is. Right, and I've got to actively not engage with this. Said, but you've shown me you're not able to do that. You just lost this. Yeah.
You might want to explain to the room that you're not coaching this to your father.
Right. That's what she just asked me.
Oh, yeah, my son Herschel, my 10-year-old son Herschel. Here, let's just have a code. I'll call my dad Dad. I don't call him Herschel. Yeah. Yeah. Guess which Herschel. It's a fun game we play, actually. Yeah. Yeah. One day that's funny. Well, that story was actually about my dad, though. Yeah. Anyway, we got some stuff to get through. Eric. Okay, I'll go on. Everybody's good. Okay. We're honest about the positive and negatives. At some point, we cross from authenticity into oversharing, right? So this is the thing now. Everybody wants to present their authentic selves, which again I can't recommend Dr. Ormsby's class enough to you. And the stuff that he shared there was just awesome for understanding this stuff. But at some point, we're in the under the guise of being authentic, we're just sharing too much. And sometimes the oversharing maybe it's personal stuff, and maybe it's just to hear yourself talk. Maybe it's just you're just sharing too much, and it just doesn't matter what you think. The next one, the posting about something does not equal doing something. The term that was coined for this was called slacktivism. Again, people feel like, oh, I'm going to raise awareness about a thing. So an example would be after something happens, you change, 3 clicks and you can change your profile picture. You've actually accomplished nothing. You've put some sort of filter with a flag or whatever on your profile picture. You feel like you've done something, but you've actually done nothing. So that's something to just, hey, let's be aware. Let's actually be trying to affect change if we're passionate about something. And this one, teach the principle of weight. We ought to ascribe weight to something based on what it costs someone to share it or say it, right? So when this is a quote from Tim Keller. To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. To be fully known and truly loved is a lot like being loved by God. But what we have in social media is to not be known and to be loved, right? And this is superficial. And so when we post something online and it gets a heart, that costs 0 to give that, right? But we ascribe a lot of weight to that. Or when somebody gets on there and, you see this a lot on Twitter, it's like you post something and then you'll have all manner of awful things being said about that. But we put a lot of weight on that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that. Well, I didn't know this. And then you've got all this weight that goes on that thing. Well, that's akin to somebody giving you the middle finger running down the highway. It's like, that just costs nothing. That's minimal cost. You're not going back home, driving home. You're like rethinking your whole life because, this happened. It's the same thing in the internet space. And conversely, what we've found our ability to do is to ascribe no weight to the people and the real relationship in our lives that come and present some important thing to us. When somebody comes and says, hey, I think you are headed for destruction, we dismiss it because we can go into this digital space and we get affirmed in these same ways. And we say, this is great. So then we go, well, I'm actually good. I'm actually fine because I have all these people that are telling me that it's okay. When in reality, you shouldn't be putting any weight on that thing. You should put all the weight on the person that put at risk all their relational capital to come to you and say, I think you need to consider this. Now, maybe you dismiss it or through conversation you decide that you don't need to, but you ought to ascribe all the weight on that thing and none of it in the other thing, but we've flipped these two. And then finally, consider the things that fill your cup versus the things that empty your cup. This will go back to, if you help your kids to see this, you think about social media and just think about how you feel after you spent an hour on social media. Right, and then I listened to an interview a guy talked about. It's like you go to a buffet and you eat too much at a buffet. It's like you just feel gross. You feel greasy somehow. It's like you're just kind of lethargic and you're tired. And it's like, yeah, that's like you go spend a bunch of time on social media. That empties your cup. that empties your cup. You can't tell, nobody can make the case that this is filling you up, right? That empties your cup. Now, guy in the interview I listened to, makes a case, hey, I think there is a case to be made. You want to go on there and doom scroll and look at memes at the end of the day and laugh a little bit, like, who cares? But you just need to let's be real about the amount of time, how we're doing this, when we're doing this. Is it controlling us? Are we controlling it? Are we in that machine zone? What's taking place here? And then think about things that do fill your cup. What are the things you enjoy doing? Which one do you spend? What are those things that you spend more time doing? Okay, when can my kids get social media? We'll blaze through this. Nobody recommends it before they're out of middle school. I would say if you're not at least in high school, you should not have social media. And I would say it would be my recommendation, if you have a kid in middle school that's on social media, it needs to stop immediately. It's not helpful. Yeah, even secular sources, would say, hey, this is unhelpful, and damaging to them. So for you to consider how, I can't remember if I've referenced it in this class or not. My kids are obsessed with, like, well, how old do I have to be to do fill in the blank? At what age can I do this? And I'm like, I don't know. It might be this age for you and different age for somebody else. And it's like, I've seen 18-year-olds that are good with this, and I've seen 23-year-olds that I wouldn't trust to do this. So it's like, age is just not important to me. So if you got to consider, how do your kids follow the current rules that they have? If they can't operate within this space in the real world, you probably don't need to give them access to the Wild West. So do they follow the current rules? What are their friendships like? How do they currently interact with challenging relationships and feedback? Man, if you've got your daughter, for instance, and she has problems with kids at school when they say things and she's in a funk for multiple days, you probably don't need to give her access to more of that on social media. You just got to know your kid ultimately. How are they disciplined? When I talk about discipline, I just mean that they have self-control, they're able to do things at certain times for specific amounts of times and things like that. It should be part of the consideration. And then, have you talked to them about porn, sexting, online predators, cyberbullying, those things? They need to be able to answer the questions. What do you do when you see something you shouldn't see? When does texting become sexting? Right? What do you do if somebody that you've never met before sends you a message? Right? They need to know the answers to these questions. You need to be preparing them for the answers to these questions. If they can't answer these questions, they don't need social media. So you need to talk to them specifically about this stuff. Those are a few things to consider. Yes. I don't consider it social media in the same sense. I mean, YouTube is,
I just think that's the strong desire in we want to have our own YouTube channel. We want to make
Yeah, no, well, that's different. Yeah, consuming on YouTube and sharing on YouTube, a little bit different. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I'd hesitate probably to. I mean, I feel like I would be of the opinion. I don't think anybody should be on TikTok. Okay, I would avoid that one. And
Snapchat still considered dangerous, or is it no longer popular with the younger kids?
yeah, Snapchat I hesitate to recommend because I don't think anybody wants it. It's not. I don't know if that would be like an appealing.
Considered dangerous because the messages disappear, so you can't monitor
Yeah.
it as a parent.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's where I would say ones that Instagram, I feel like would probably be where I would start. And again, and Facebook, and it's just like you can keep this stuff and lock it down. in any app that you can use in a browser. We'll talk about filtering. I know we're running out of time, but ones that the problem with apps, they don't go through filtering stuff, and I don't even like that for myself. Yeah, I don't know. So that kind of doesn't answer your question. But I'd probably start Instagram and just see how we do here, and what other ones do you want, and then you might, I'd say definitely not this. I'm sorry, you can't have that, or yeah, we can talk about this. Be real. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, honestly, the Snapchat. I mean, I know we're running out of time here. I mean, Snapchat was created to encourage more authentic engagements, real engagements with people. Just like, this class happens to be recorded, but if I pass you out here in the hallway, it's like, this is just a fleeting interaction we have. That's how that was created to be. It wasn't created as like a sexting tool. It turned into be that. But and then be real. Kind of fixed some of the problems of Snapchat and encourage authentic engagement. I think that's could be good. I don't know a ton about it. I know people are using it. It seems good. To me, the parameters are, can I get in there and look at it? Does stuff go away? Can I see what you're seeing and what you've sent? If I can satisfy those things, then I'm inclined to say yes to that social media. That's probably how I should have started with that. Yeah. Yeah, Discord has some really awful stuff on it because you can do anything. You can have a Discord about anything. That has some really nice communities, there too. Some good community-driven stuff, but you can find some awful stuff in Discord. And Twitch kind of the same way. Twitch typically they can't do it within the app. You have to go externally to find some awful stuff, but you can be connected to it through the app. All right, general screen usage, a big thing, just trying to teach the difference between consumption and creation, moderation. We've got to model this, for you to have some of you might need to implement something in your home you've never done before. Then conversation probably need to go, hey, I want to be more intentional for us in our home with these things. Let's set up some good habits and patterns. And here's what I'm doing. And here's what I'm expecting everybody else to do. So we've got to model it. And then what are the things that are truly social? What are things that are interactive? What are things that are just consumption driven, just based on just make you a consumer? And then think about your physical spaces in your home. What's at the center of the places where you spend most of your time? One of the big things we did in our home, we don't have a TV on our main living spaces. We have a nice big TV downstairs. I'm not saying it's bad. I like having a TV. I like being able to watch movies. But what we found was if we had TV in our main area, it was just on. It was just on. It was always on. It was just playing. It was just kind of in the back. And it's like continuing to drive this desire. We moved it to the basement. Again, make it an enjoyable place to be. That's not a wrong thing. But you just think about what's in the center of your spaces. And then 1 hour a day, 1 day per week, 1 week per year, where you go without screens of any kind. What if you did that? What if that was a pattern of your home? Okay, we've got to go. So filtering and monitoring, which I recommend, but this big point, it isn't enough, right? Is one thing here, your kids are only as safe as their friend's phone, right? Which that's a terrifying thing. So whatever you put on their phone, they've got friends with phones, then there you go. The purpose of filtering relates to opportunity and desire. What you want to do is minimize the intersection of those two things. When you have a desire, you want to have filters in place so that the opportunity is not there. And then you want to orient your life so that when you have the opportunity, you do not have the desire, right? This is just a principle of life that all of us should apply. But this is what this is. This isn't saying this isn't going to fix all this. Get these on there, you just never have these desires. You want it to be complicated to get to when you're trying to. The 85-15 principle is you should spend 85% of your time pursuing good, godly things. if, for filtering for you, if you're thinking, or you set it up for your kids or whomever, and you set up the idea here is don't look at porn, don't look at porn, don't look at porn, don't look at porn, don't see bad stuff, don't see bad stuff. Well, this is the all-consuming thought here. This stuff will not satisfy that. You've got to 85% of your time and effort should be on beholding good, honorable, right things. And then you have 15% of your time that you're spending, hey, I want to make sure that I'm forsaking this. I've set up stuff in my life. There you go. I'll just highlight this. Sometimes filtering and monitoring can give you a false sense of security. And then what we've alluded to earlier is one day they're going to leave your house. So if you've just said, you can't do any of this stuff while you're here, but you haven't taught them anything, then at some point they leave. I'm not going to go into that. They just need to know there's different types of filtering that can happen. And maybe if you're interested, you can take a picture of this screen. These are some apps and stuff that are really helpful to use for monitoring your kids' stuff. They even have some phones that are specific that have these apps on them. There, I'll see a couple pictures. Some of them are filtering apps. And I would say all of my devices are monitored. It's just protection for you. It's helpful. You got to model this stuff for your kids. My dad Herschel, okay, sees everything that I consume, right? And I'm grateful for him. His willingness to do that, and it's just like, man, we do have to be modeling these. These are some great apps on there is no one solution. I'll say this too: as you look to doing these things, it's usually a multi-tiered thing. Our big two are Hour Packed and Accountable to You. This is a monitoring and filtering service, and then this controls the apps on their phones. They'll have both of these things on all their devices and my devices. So there you go. And then finally, some recommended resources. TechWise Family is a great thing. If you go to the Barna has their own, I've mentioned it before, they have a thing called Barna Access Plus. And if you join that, it's like $20 or something for a month, but they have a TechWise Family course that you can do. It helps you to think intentionally about this stuff. And then it is a book too. Yeah, the book's great. My TechWise Life, I mentioned that. It's a sweet book. So Amy, who is Andy's daughter, is going off to college, and she writes this book, and she talks about her digital practices as she's leaving the home. And then her dad, Andy, writes a letter of response after each chapter to just say, hey, I'm encouraged by this. This is helpful. This is why I think you'll find this to be particularly good. It's a really sweet book. Again, you'll hear me talk about access.org all the time. They have some specific guides on social media and internet filtering and monitoring that have great resources in there. There's a book, if you want to think about it for yourself or ways that you help your kids, this 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You is incredibly enlightening. You can get it on Hoopla and listen to it in probably 5 hours. And then Jonathan Haidt, if you just Google his name and social media, you'll find a link. This is a page on his website that has all of his studies, which are exhaustive on social media and the effects on people. And then just recently found this site. It's the best one that I found. It's called Protect Young Eyes. And they have just an insane amount of helps on how to help you to do these things, and tech walkthroughs and screenshots and plans and processes, and what if your kids are able to get around this, and here's what you do. And they're all like tech-minded people. So there you go.